This is Adriano Ercolani for Cinema Daily US. I have the pleasure to talk with Christian Zwiegel, screenwriter and director of Sovereign. Um, your movie is based on true events, tragic true events, but it's also an original screenplay. So my first question is, how did you relate to what really happened in May 2010, and what is slightly fictional in your screenplay?
So the film I was drawn to this story because I had a family member who was going through a mental health issue who became really involved in anti-government conspiracy theory type ideology at one point. And in trying to understand that, I started researching the sovereign citizen movement in the United States and came across this crime of the 2010 West Memphis police shooting with Jerry and Joe Kane. And I just thought it was a fascinating, I thought it was very compelling, the father and son story at the center of this between Jerry and Joe Kane. And I thought it would make a compelling film to tell this coming of age story of a young man growing up in this environment. And I also was really interested in the themes that the story touched on, not just in American culture, gun culture, and policing, and sort of individual liberty and sovereignty as a concept. But I think they sort of apply globally right now as well in a lot of ways. And so I felt that this was a story that I could bring some personal experience to and an access point, but still, and then that would help inform the research that I'd done on the topic and sort of position me well to be the writer director.
Absolutely. Uh, what I think there's an aspect of your movie that addresses something that I experienced, and it kind of shocked me since I moved in United States. In America, there is the idea of the rights of the human beings, of the single individual, is most of times stronger and more important than the rights of the community. And this
Yeah.
is something that your movie shows pretty well. How do you think this conflict between a single individual and community can be resolved and not create issues like the Jerry and Joe Kane story?
Well, I think that rugged individualism, I guess, is sort of an American term, and it's a key characteristic of American culture. It's part of American identity is that this is a place where individuals forge their path and sort of make their fortune. That's the American dream.
Mm.
That's not a communal message, really. That's a very individualistic message. And I think trying to function in that system in today's world is becoming increasingly difficult. That used to be an empowering message, I think, in the past, but I think a lot of the problems, and this is my just personal opinion, but I feel like a lot of the troubles we're seeing is that you have this individualistic drive to succeed, to make something of yourself, of this individual significance, and but you have a lot of people where that's just not possible. And so you have people that feel disenfranchised and preyed upon and disempowered. And I think that feeling of disempowerment becomes really toxic. And that's where sort of bad ideas can take hold, I think. And I think hopefully, I don't have the answer to a lot of these problems. They're very complex. If you're being honest about it, they're very complex.
Mhm.
And but I hope that this film raises questions. I love films that sort of raise questions in an honest way rather than pretend to have the answer and lecture to people about something. We weren't trying to make a lecture with this movie. That can be satisfying or sort of unsatisfying for some viewers. Sometimes I think we've become accustomed with certain types of movies to expect a more passive experience where we're sort of given the message of the film at the end. This is really an invitation to start a conversation, this film. So, and I think great films, all my favorite films from the 70s, I think that was a real tradition in American cinema at one point. And so we were trying to do that here as, with our small but mighty movie that we're trying to make.
You basically anticipated a little bit my next question. Is Was there a director or a specific movies that inspired you when you started thinking about how to compose visually, or also in developing of the screenplay,
Mhm.
Sovereign?
Yeah, there were. I mean, there's a lot of contemporary directors that I certainly have been influenced by. I I think I'm not alone. I probably think every probably film fan, American film fan, is a fan of American films from the 70s. I love directors like Sidney Lumet, and that period. That was a touchstone, I guess. Paul Schrader, I First Reformed is one of my favorite films. But films that accurately really talk about the world that we're living in, and there's a lot to talk about in this country right now and in the world. And I think in the concept of kind of American cinema, I'd like this to sort of be an entry into that, in whatever small way we can be.
Hmm. And it's also important because I was thinking just after to watch the movie, there are not many movies that actually talk about the hidden part of America. Most of the movies are set in metropolis, in Middle East, but these little pieces of America that not many outside the borders know, and actually they represent, let's call it the dark side
Yeah.
of this country in some way. I think it's important to give voice and to put the spotlight in this kind of stories as well.
Yes.
Mm. I would like to talk about Nick Offerman because he really gave, I think, the performance of a lifetime. I've seen him
Thank-
doing some kind of similar characters in The Last of Us and in Civil War, addressing, the very conservative characters. But in Sovereign, he gives Jerry Kane completely different nuances from what he's done before. How did you work with him in order to create the balance?
Mhm.
Because he's the perpetrator in the movie, but he's also in some he's also the victim of his own
Yeah.
action, of his own ideas. He's also victim of the system, which is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was Nick's performance is brilliant. It was really important for us, and I could tell in my conversations with him, you can't play a villain, and we didn't want Jerry. Sort of, if you look at it from a narrative structural standpoint, technically is the villain in this film, but he's just as you said, he's a victim in many ways, as well, and I think that uh, with Nick, it was just about having a lot of deep conversations about what we felt made this guy tick. What were the his motivations in each scene, and where was he coming from at a certain point. And I think he does, once he's put under so much pressure, and I think you see it at one point in the movie. What starts as sort of a delusional belief system turns into a type of psychosis at some point, and you realize that it's not just eccentricity or a weird belief. It's actually tipped into a mental issue, health issue of some kind. And I think that was also important for Nick to be able to understand understand where when that switch happened. But um but also at the core of it, and I think this was true of the real person, I think he genuinely loved his son. I think regardless of his flaws or his beliefs, he really did want the best for his son, and loved his son. And that's hard to that's a difficult and very complicated thing to sort of wrap your head around when you see what he did and how he treated his son. But I think that kind of complexity is really interesting, and I think what Nick played so beautifully in this film.
Hmm. Uh, Following your answer, which has been the most challenging scene to shoot in an emotional way in this movie?
I would say the scene, in the most emotionally challenging scene, was the scene where Nick chases Jacob out into the field, after they've uh, had the confrontation with the police, the first confrontation. And that was a very heavy and dramatic scene, and figuring out how to shoot that and cover that in a way that felt appropriate for the moment, and balance that with the performances, and that was probably the most dramatically difficult scene. In terms of just most difficult scenes to shoot, there were probably more practical scenes. We had a
Hmm.
very short time frame. I would say it was the shootout scene at the end. We had to shoot that entire thing in one day, which was very, very, very stressful. And then the scene where uh, Dennis Quaid and Nancy Travis discover their son. That scene that's in the film is actually one take. We had one take to
Wow.
shoot that entire thing because we had lost our light and we had lost the day and the road was getting opened back up. And so we had literally one take to get that. And to the actors' credit, they just went for it and it was great.
Great performance here by Dennis Quaid, absolutely. I'm really happy you mentioned him.
Yeah.
Mhm. Another thing that actually really shocked me watching the movie is that Jerry and Joe Kane story happened 15 years ago,
Yeah.
which, and I did a little bit of research. 15 years ago, there were more than 300,000 sovereign citizens in US. And we're talking about 15 years
15
ago
years.
and other political climate in the country. So you probably made some researches also about what's going on nowadays. Did the situation change it a lot in US in these 15 years?
I suspect that it's proliferated quite a bit since then. I think that QAnon is sort of an offshoot. I don't know if you're familiar with that movement at all. QAnon was kind of an offshoot of sovereign citizens, or at least in the same sort of world. Uh, I think the internet was certainly online in 2010, but it's not as in everybody's pocket. Mobile wasn't as much of a thing in 2010, so I suspect that has just grown exponentially since then, and certainly our political climate today in this country is these fringe ideologies are much more rampant, I think, even than they were back then.
Absolutely. One last question. You already said that most likely message is not the right word for this movie. But let's put it in this way. What would you like the audience will take away watching Sovereign?
I hope that it's a movie that makes them think. I hope that if there is a central message to the film, it's really kind of my as much of a statement as I would make with it is really in the last scene of the film, which is about we're living in a very divided time, I think, not just in the country but in the world. And a lot of these very complex issues, I think we've lost our ability to empathize with other people. Certainly with these extremist movements, there are a lot of people who are drawn to these things through real injuries they sustained, whether they lost their homes, they are having some sort of mental health issue, a serious, schizophrenia or delusional disorder or some sort of psychiatric break. Um, it's a call for more compassion and more compassionate systems. Also, right now, law enforcement is in a very difficult position as well. They risk their lives every day to go out and deal with someone having a psychiatric break. That's not what their training is. And so symbolically, I guess, the last scene is really to try to say, if we can approach these very complicated issues with a sense of humanity and compassion, that's the first step towards healing and finding a solution.
Absolutely. Mrs. Zwiegel, thank you very much for the interview. Again, congratulations for the movie. It's really one of the best movies and the most important movies I've seen this
Wow.
year.
That means so
So
much. Thank you so much for watching it and engaging and speaking to me about it. We're such a small movie. We're trying to get the word out. So
no,
I
absolutely.
appreciate it so
I
much.
think it's what people in my profession should do in order to endorse movies like yours. So I have to thank you.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful speaking with you.
Nice to be
All
with
right.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.